Hey guys, Mustached Tom here to review Tomb Raider, The Legend of Lara Craft. Now, I had seen no trailers for this series, which tells me that Netflix is, definitely has issues with promoting stuff, I guess, because I had no clue that this even came out. And the only reason I know that it came out is that I started to see these negative reviews of the show, and I was quite curious as to why a video game adaptation series would, especially in a new era where you can get, well, either really bad video game movies or you can get the really good ones. You know, it's actually been quite split now these days, where it used to only be purely bad. But here we are in 2024, and me confused as all hell as to why, again, this show got only negative reviews. So I decided to click on the very first negative review. It happened to come up as the Cricital Drinkers review on the Tomb Raider. I watched it. It was inherently vague about, like, he does his typical, like, the writing is bad stuff and all that. He doesn't say how to improve the writing, of course, because he's a lazy content creator, so I'm not surprised that he only ever went that far. So I went into the series after watching that review, but still wanted to look at it as objectively as possible. Putting aside the bias of Tomb Raider being a long-standing video game franchise and all of that aside, and just looking at, if we were to just isolate this series, how good is it actually? So, it was clear to me when this opened up and we're following young Lara Croft here. She's in one of her earlier tomb adventures, is sort of the idea and concept of the first episode at least. And she's teamed up with a number of people, but one of them, the primary ones for the first episode, is named Roth, who is guiding her essentially. Sort of a uncle figure, I guess, or her uncle. That was a little bit unclear, to be precise. Again, willing to criticize where criticism is due. Not sure what their entire relationship was, if it was just familial, or if it was more mentor / student, and a little unclear. Fair enough. Criticism earned. There you go. But it was clear that they were still working together, and came across one of these a green box after exploring this tomb, after being chased by these assailants, who Lara Croft initially thought were trying to also raid this tomb alongside them. But after looking into the details and the lore of the cavern, or tomb in this case, she learned that they were trying to defend this position from something, or defend the artifact itself. But despite that, Roth still had to defend her from getting shot in this instance. And this was, again, a relatively younger Croft. Someone who's clearly, based on the expressions, someone who was not quite used to that level of extreme in her, her early days, which is, sort of the idea of, like, okay, we're going to build up this character, sort of the idea here. And that's something I should note immediately, is I said character, because when I watched the Critical Drinkers review, he kept referring this stupid notion that Lara Croft shouldn't be a character, but rather an icon? What the fuck? I'm sorry, but no, I'm gonna take good writing over icon, which again is vague for me. I don't know what that means. So yeah, I'm not really sure what his point of mentioning an icon, or whatever word he used, in this regard, what that was supposed to mean. But what I was seeing was a character happening, or character exploration beginning to unfold, as we then follow up with Lara Croft 3 years later in a aggressive fight. She's sparring to just keep on, keep up with her training, and she gets further intel, and she's still distraught because we learn after her that Roth has been killed from I think it was either from Jonah or Zip. One of the two mentioned this to her, like, oh, you need to get over this this event that has happened. We get these flashbacks of another adventure, sometime split between these two. And I will say, for the point of this is a great place to place a second criticism, is that if they had more episodes, I think they could have explored this full, a scenario where Roths and Laura are dealing with this new tomb event where, again, these events unfold with a better pacing alongside. But that's not what we get, and I'm unfortunate, but to state the obvious, is that we are in the era of animation struggling currently, and we know that there are the animation strikes and all that stuff going on, and just the lack of episodes that we get per season. I mean, these people are just not given enough time on both ends to tell a full story. That much is crystal clear to me. The fact that this is only 8 episodes long, and there's a gap here in season 1 that's already been mentioned. It has to be, we have to skip time in order to get Lara to closer to the position that we would recognize her in the video game era, which I'm assuming based off of this Lara Croft. This is based off of the reboot of Lara Croft, where she has her allies established in the video games as well. I think they're the same characters. I could be wrong on that, but I have not played those, so I think that's the case, though, if I were to guess. At any rate, point being is that we follow her 3 years later, and we are learning more about this chest that has the emerald, this gem in it. As we see her competitor, we learn about him as the episodes progress. His name is Charles. He's the antagonist of the show, who is, as he sort of, and I'm paraphrasing here, is cut from the same cloth is sort of the idea. He went through a very similar idea, or ordeal, rather. And his end conclusion is that if he had more strength, through these gems that he believes will give him said strength, would allow him to get his revenge. So he's hunting for these gems, and now we know that there are plural of them, 4 to be exact. And they prey upon these negative connotations with revenge, anger, betrayal, and greed, I believe, are the 4. And their color association to distinguish them from one another. Of course, these are acting as our 4 different MacGuffins that are here to collect. And as Charles is even in the collection of the first, we see that he's inflicted, when he sees that he had controlled somebody and almost got him to kill the boat person when they were traveling, we see that Charles was, he told him to stop, and then he legitimately felt bad at that time, and then as we progress, we see that the level of control that these things have is starting to consume him, is sort of the idea. These concepts these negative concepts are consuming him, is sort of the tangential, like what these MacGuffins stand for. These are the attributes that he's giving himself to take on this group called the Light, this hidden group, as we keep learning about, that had dealt his father a killing blow for not doing some sort of deal or something or other. So, again, we have now a very similar character with that in confrontation, again, with Laura. And we see him take further steps. He takes control of Jonah, one of our partners, the bigger guy, who uses these times throughout the season to try to get Laura to see that she doesn't have to do this alone, that, you know, she doesn't have to feel guilty, and that is sort of his repetitious role throughout the season, as Zip is more so on the comms, making sure they know where to go next. That's sort of his main role in this as well. He's sort of a side or secondary character, rather. And then there's Cam, who is someone who Laura was in a long friendship with. They were told different things by the same person, and then they were split apart for a long period of time, and now they're finally catching up and are able to relive some of their adventures in the latter half of the season as we progress through. Now, one thing that was failed to mention in the reviews is that we get a lot of lore in the episodes, and I feel like this is something worth mentioning if we're ever going to talk about one of the real reasons Lara Croft or even Indiana Jones even exists to begin with. I feel like the action is the dressing, actually. That's the part that I think Critical Drinker fails to recognize, because he does not ever once say in his review, once, that she goes to a temple and learns about the lore, in which we learn about the lore in, say, Da Ji and Nuwa specifically, in, I believe it's the Chinese myths. Now, what's interesting about those is that Da Ji is recognized in this particular season as someone who can be seen as either good or evil, depending on which perspective you're looking at. And I have seen other media and video games specifically where Da Ji is portrayed as evil. In this case, she's portrayed as good, and that she was defending herself from another entity, another god or goddess. It wasn't Nuwa, she was another protector. And I had notes that I had written, and then I didn't save them, so that's why my this review is a little bit more scattered, and I do apologize on that, but point being, as I believe the other god was named Tai Gong Xiang, something along those lines. And I thought I had heard that name before as well. That's not the case, so that might be something else. But, again, this has failed to be mentioned anywhere in his review. And I'm sorry, but that's like the main point of Lara Croft and Indiana Jones, is to get people interested in history. That's their point. The action is the dressing that you put on top to get people intrigued in the history. That's it. That's the point of Lara Croft and Indiana Jones. And how do you make an entire review and skip over all of that? And it's in all 8 episodes. You learn something about the Chinese myths of Da Ji and Nuwa, as I mentioned. You get the lore. I believe it's in Paris about the Templars and one of their gods. Again, I don't have the notes, so I apologize, but at least I'm trying to remember like some of the lore, because again, that's the actual point of Tomb Raider. It just is. That's a fact. Like, I don't know how else to put that. So that's like the key And we can also look at the bigger theme of this particular season, which is balance. She must balance herself as proclaimed by various characters, such as Jonah, again, telling her that she doesn't have to guilt herself so much, which would be much more negative without any sort of positive reinforcement, right? And so on and so forth. Balancing yourself to recognize both of these things is that you can still feel, that sorrow, but you don't have to feel the guilt, is sort of the idea of that. Or, putting all of your eggs in one emotional basket is another way of putting it, as it can be. And, she makes contact in the latter half of the episodes directly to Daji, so again, I'm not sure why she's not mentioned anywhere in this review, as I keep mentioning, but here we are, where, she's, this is like when she's already collected all the pieces, all the gems back, and Daji does like this mystical enhancing of all the gems and crushes them to reset the world, because these gems, being in the possession of this human for this X amount of time, being open and revealed for that long, is causing the rest of the world to fall under this destruction and chaos. And again, that's all preambled within the lore as well, which again is, I find baffling that it's nowhere mentioned in this review. So I think that I would just argue it's one of his worst reviews I've seen. Like, it does not address the point of Lara Croft at all. Like, how? How do you play the video games and not understand what the point of those are? Even the older ones. Like, come on. Unless there's another reason he's bringing it up, which I can only shrug and think, well, he must only like her for being a sexy female. That's the only thing I can think of that's left. That's it. Because he kind of alludes to it in his review. That's sort of the idea. And I'm like, but you can do so much more. I'm sorry, but, like, yeah, sexual attraction's like a baseline. But it's like seasoning. It's not like a core element of what makes something good. Like, you have to have good writing. That's just a fact. Like, and I'm sorry, but just saying the writing is bad without saying how to fix it, well, if I were a creator and listening to that, I'd be like, well, what do? I have 8 episodes to work with. How do I address every singular thing in 8 episodes? That is something that I think that certain reviewers tend to forget, is the amount of time that is allotted given to these shows is insanely short. They have to pack in so much information in such a short amount of time. And these episodes are like, the first episode's like 50 minutes, I think. And the other episodes past that one are like 20 minutes each. About approximation-wise. So you have to stuff so much information in 8 episodes that are 20, most of them that are 20-minute episodes long. And you have to hook every single one of them to make sure that, the people would be interested to see what happens next. Typically it would be like, oh, Charles got his hand on another MacGuffin. How is Laura going to keep catching up with him? Or, he had captured him, Jonah, at the end of one of the episodes. How does Laura deal with that? And so on and so forth. And, there's this particular scene on this train where he's still possessed, or repossessed at this point, and Laura is on the train and she sees all these other people who are possessed at this point, and they're just sort of sitting there idly because he has to give them a command for them to do a thing. That is a rule that is set sort of by the intrinsic, it's never stated, I think, if I remember that correctly, but you just see it, like, you see him make the command, and then the person who has the green eyes attempts to do the command to the best of the ability, though there does seem to be an implementation of, even the first time around, we see a slow, methodical approach, all the way back to the boat one, where the guy's like taking his sweet time, taking out the gun, raising it, pulling up against the trigger without fully pressing it all the way in. All that sort of stuff to indicate that there is sort of this minor or even medium resistance that can be inflicted that is causing these people to take these orders and do them slowly in that sort of way. And here on the train, he is clearly with another gem in hand. He is now the green one and the red one. The green one was the control one, and the red one was this wrath one. And so this is the one that's truly making him seethe into that revenge, as I alluded to earlier. It isn't until that point where you really, you see him still regretting, again, as early as the boat. And even here, even with the wrath one, you do see a minor bit of regret when she gets away with Jonah. She's able to pull him far enough away from his influence, and then all of them are looking at Charles, and he can't stand the idea that he knows that they're just waiting on him, and he can't stand that idea, so he orders them all to look away, and then we cut away as well, shortly after the fact. So we have all these things going on with Cam. Again, we had that separation. So we have the betrayal gem, which is the yellow gem. And her and Laura having this long separation, and betrayal is sort of like... And we get to have all these little fun moments with, like, Laura running through this area of the tomb that she's in, and then there's, like, this hallucinogen type thing going on, where we see Laura as a younger child through her flashbacks, but still holding the weapon, as if, like, doing all these creative visual storytelling beats of, her fears, her anxiety towards the situation with Cam, the elongated separation, and their negligented ability to talk with one another in that way, to sort things out in a meaningful way with the time that they have. So he implies that there's, I guess, a lesbian relationship with the two, and then he goes on to say, well, I despise it because he's gay. And I'm sorry, but, like, that's what I took away from him. When I say him, I'm referring to Critical Drinker again here. And the only reason I can come to that conclusion is because, again, he just says, well, every time he comes on, he does the stereotypical, like, flamboyant gay thing, and then that's that. And, like, he shows, like, this one earlier moment where, they have, like, the sheets, covering the statues, and then one, like, reveals, like, a flaccid penis or whatever, and then he's the one who uncovers that part of it, and then it's like, well, he, like, kind of is flustered or whatever. And outside of that one moment, the only other moment, as far as I knew, that confirmed that he was gay is that he danced with a guy. That's it. The 2 moments. And yet, then Critical Drinker says, oh, he's flamboyantly gay. I'm like, what? Flamboyantly gay? Like, what do you mean? Like, what? How do you... And he doesn't explain this, of course, because fuck me, I don't know what that means in terms of, like, the writing, because I don't see anything, or I'm not hearing anything that's coming across as flamboyantly gay. Again, the only two instances were this sort of, I guess, subconscious reveal, and then a actual, like, oh, he's dancing with a guy, so, yeah, obviously, right? That's it. That's the only two instances I can point to be like, yeah, I can see why, even in the first instance, you can assume he's gay, and then the second part would be, well, now you can confirm he's gay. That's it. That's it. And the absolute gall to be like, well, there's this whole flamboyant thing. I'm like, where's the writing to prove this? Show a clip. He doesn't. Of course he doesn't, because there's none. At least I don't think there is. Outside of the two examples that are, again, one visual and then one direct. That's it. Wow. Crazy. It's like, I don't know what else to say about that other than he updates Laura about, like, where to go. That's his entire job throughout all 8 episodes, primarily, when he's ever present. Yeah, he's a little snarky, I guess. Like, a little bit, but I don't know if I would say that's necessarily flamboyant. Like, I'm not sure if that translation is hitting the same. But I digress. Point being is that he's a rather simplistic gay character. Like, he's not complex. I mean, you only have 8 episodes, so I wasn't assuming he was going to be complex. Neither is Jonah, for that matter. And neither is Cam, for that matter. The only two that really have any, further sort of developments are Laura herself, which makes sense, she's the main character, and Charles, who's the antagonist, and showing how they relate in their backstories. Those are the only additive details, other than Lara Croft in her earlier years was more prone to being vulnerable, more prone to being, and again later on, to feeling that guilt, feeling that responsibility during one of her missions, which is very human. It's very character-driven, and Critical Drinker wants to sap all of that away. I'm not joking when I say this. He wants to sap all of this away because it's feminine. What the fuck? I'm sorry. What? What? I don't know how to even go about that. Other to say that, again, this is easily one of the worst reviews I have ever seen. And, like, it's like, what do you mean? It's like, for the first time, maybe outside of a reboot, again, I have not played it myself, so I don't know how much of a character she is there, but, again, just looking at this alone, if I were completely new to Tomb Raider, I'd be like, okay, she's the character who's very vulnerable, but she's still willing to go on these adventures, and now and then this time skip allows us to supersede some of that gap and then say, okay, now she's feeling guilt on a mission we unfortunately don't get to see the full. We get to see very, very snippeted versions of what happened, all kind of throughout the season, to Ross, or Roth, whatever his name is, specifically. And, that is, the risk that comes involved in having a team. And one of his criticisms is that she's meant to go out there all alone and be independent and all of that. And I guess that applies to the original games, I guess? Though I don't know if that's even entirely true either, considering that she does have at least someone telling her where to go at certain points, even in the earlier games, if I remember them correctly. And I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Like, it's not like she's fully independent, and nor is Indiana Jones, so I'm a little baffled by that. A lot of his adventures, for example, are with his father, especially in the earlier Indiana Jones movies, the ones that are, critically acclaimed to be so good. So this idea that she needs to be alone is baffling to me. And then he has this weird take that, she needs to take orders from a man, and masculinity, and the current day messaging, and the blah blah. Okay, did you not hear reference to the theme of the show? It was called Balance. If you didn't catch it, because it's not once mentioned in his review, so I guess he missed it. So, the idea would be is that you would need both a balance emotionally and balance in masculinity and femininity. How about that? And that's exactly what I was seeing when they came together and worked together with Cam 2. 2 females, her and Cam, Laura, and then 2 males, Zip and Jonah. Just happens to be 2 and 2. Interesting. Roth is gone, so he's no longer a part of that equation, and Charles is the antagonist, so he's not a part of that equation either. So, balance, as it were. How about that? And, so you can sort of extrapolate. I was able to extrapolate balance based off of a criticism he had, because he didn't even bother to think about it, I guess. Or, again, he must have missed the theme. It's one of those two, I'm not sure which. Anywho, point being is that he eventually, Charles, the antagonist, of course, gets 4 of the 4 MacGuffins, and she has her team with her. They have reorganized. She was able to conquer herself through support of, again, the influence of Daji, who was like, reinforcing the idea that you need to find this balance within yourself, because that is the only true way you're going to be able to defeat Charles, who's so dependent on these negative emotions that are, manifested in the MacGuffins, that's the only thing that is driving him at this point in the latter half of the season. So you need to be able to, again, not even necessarily let go of those emotions, that's not the point, but to recognize the positives within to close the gap, as it were, in an emotional way to, again, reach balance, is, again, the idea. So that is why when she regains the possession of, and we see this earlier in the season to set this up, she gains possession of one of the 4 artifacts, and when she does earlier, she gains the Wrath one, the red one, which she starts aggressively attacking the guys that are, she was sneaking around earlier, trying not to get caught, she was being very patient, and so on and so forth, but once she got her hands on the artifact, that wrath entered her, and she became abruptly more aggressive, and she killed people under that influence, straight up. So, obviously, she's not immune to this, but we see later on in that very same episode her fighting it, her resisting it, and she needed to be reminded, and through Daji, she is reminded to re-find that balance, because it's not something that is one and done, right? It's a constant state of thinking about these things, of being cognitively aware where you are at emotionally speaking, so that you're able to make these more delicate decisions in these high octane scenarios where, again, he's getting ready to get revenge on all of these light guys instead of, doing the proper justice thing and bringing them to prison, which is what the rest of the team was trying to do at that point. And he's over there trying to kill all these guys outright. And by extension, when he has all four of these, he literally transforms, another thing that is completely missed in Drinker's review, because of course it is, into this mystical beast. And I guess I could best describe it as a chimera type. It looks like it's made up of various things. But what you can clearly see is that the gems are infused in the body now. So, once our characters, the two that are primarily there, Lara and Cam in this instance, are there, and they see that they have the opportunity, they are able to blast the gems back out of his body, creating enough distance from themselves to him that his power is decreasing back to the previous state per gem. So they eventually get all four gems out, then he's back to his humanoid form, and he's able to get arrested, and you can clearly see, as early as it was, you see that very same initial reaction be checked here to show that he does feel that guilt, that he feels that same responsibility, that level of revenge wasn't, it wasn't going to bring him any level of true satisfaction in that way. And as someone who's, played a character that was very much, in D&D myself, very focused on the revenge thing, my whole archetype was, in that sense, dealing with, instead of having revenge for self, instead protecting that force from dealing out evil to others. It became about re-engaging in the way you think about revenge. If that evil could potentially harm another person or another group of people, do you have an obligation in that sense to stop that person in a different, meaningful way? And that's the character that I wanted to explore in my first D&D, game. And I think it's a very convincing, very interesting avenue to explore. But that's not the case here, obviously. Anyway, point being is that obviously Lara and team then stop him, Charles, they arrest him, and then we have our stinger for a potential season 2. So it was set up as early as episode 1, or the flashbacks anyway, that there was this other woman, I believe her name was Sam, if I remember that correctly, who was there during that mission with Ross, who also seems to have been placing this guilt on Lara, but now she seems to be missing, and she arrives there and we see her investigate the room, and it's a mess, and, she sees the window open, and this targeting board that she has open, and she takes one of the pictures of the many people and proceeds to leave, is the idea to set up season 2. If that ever comes out, considering how low this season has done in terms of, I'm assuming these bad reviews have been placing it, and has seemingly, I've seen on the sites, like, the scores were like 5 out of 5, and I'm like, are you kidding me? This was 5 out of 5. For 8 episodes? I would honestly give this on the higher end score for what they were able to achieve in 8 episodes. Like, I think they deserve a season 2, quite frankly. And I'm gonna go a step further. I think this is the best Lara Croft has ever been. Period. Critical Drinker is dead wrong. This is the best Lara Croft has ever been in her history. This is where she needs to be moving forward. Fuck all that icon, she's not a character bullshit. No. Make her a character, which they did here, and maintain that. And there you move from there. And, furthermore, the animation, which is something I typically don't talk about, but it was mentioned in that Critical Drinker review, he said it was all stilted and whatnot. Sure, when they're talking, I guess that's true. But the action in this? Fuck no! That animation was insanely impressive. The way, especially the fight with her against a T-Rex, by the way, is like one of the last things she does. And of course, if you played the original Tomb Raider, you know that she's dealt with that sort of prehistoric encounter before with the 2 handguns. She's given the 2 handguns at the end of the season here. Episode 8, the final episode, she deals with a bear to a degree, and then leaves it to Jonah to continue to replace the 4 gems. But then there's the T-Rex, and the way she bounces around, flipping and turning, and the animation is so smooth, and the camera panning with her actions is so insane. And then, she has one of the most badass moments I have ever seen Lara Croft pull off, where she is out of handgun bullets. She asks for the shotgun, which Jonah has. She jumps in the air with nothing. The T-Rex has its mouth open. She lands on its mouth, or on top of its head, rather, and then does a spinning headshot. Like, how the fuck do you say that that is bad animation? That was bad-ass animation. I'm sorry. What the fuck were you watching when you said that that was bad animation? You did not show it because you're lying at this point. I'm sorry. If you did not show the most badass thing in the entire season and then declare that there's bad animation, that to me is lying. You are lying to your audience if you don't have the audacity to show the most amazing shit that I have ever seen Lara Croft do in the history of her video game repertoire, or remake repertoire, because I haven't played it all that much, and, like, it's, like, insane. Like, the level scaling is insane here. And yeah, like, I can even criticize the animation in episode 1. She does this insane, unreal jump. Like, to the extent that I'd be like, no, not that jump. That jump was way too unreal. Like, I like the way that past that episode she uses her tools. I really, really like that fix. Immediately. And then she does the most badass thing where she's, you know, the way she's moving, she's moving across these obstacles or the environment in a more substantive way where it's like parkour, but it's like, I could believe this based on everything I know about Lara Croft prior to this. You know, all of her training and all that stuff. Like, I could totally buy that she would be able to pull this off. Absolutely. And again, it's the most badass thing I've ever seen Lara Croft do. So, if you have not seen this show, and if you saw the Critical Drinkers review or someone else's review that was telling you that this is bad, watch the season for yourself. Or, if you came to the conclusion that this is somehow a 5 out of 10, rewatch the show, please. 'Cause this is not a 5 out of 10. Not even close. This is a 9 or a... yeah, I'd probably say an 8 out of 10, to be fair. Again, to be as objective as possible. I do have to acknowledge that there's still that rough earlier animation and that gap. Again, real criticisms that I can levy against the show within its context of only having 8 episodes. You could have had a longer episode 2 or 3 or 4, and even that that would still have to be something that would have to have been fought for more animation time, right? So regardless, like, that's time on the clock. So it's still even a hard ask. So again, this is an 8 out of 10. Easily the best Lara Croft has ever been. And if you missed it due to a Critical Drinkers review or some other negative review, and if you haven't seen it yourself, and if you're a fan of Lara Croft, watch this show. It is so good. It is so amazingly good, and it hits on everything Lara Croft needs to be, because it gets you interested in history. That's the real secret key that is missing. Again, all the stuff with Daji, Nuwa, the Templar, and there's so much more lore that they can explore. There's so many legendary myths that live in our worlds of, different countries and different regions and all of that stuff. Like, there's so much potential there. And, like, the fact that this is potentially gonna die in one season is utterly insane to me, considering how insanely good this is. It is a crying shame that this is only potentially going to get one season. So again, I highly recommend watching it. It's the best Lara Croft it's ever been, and yeah. That's my review of Tomb Raider and the Legend of Lara Croft. And if you ended up enjoying this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out the links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second, to my PayPal, which can help support me and my channel directly. And third, to my Discord server, where you can join, collab, show, all that cool stuff for free. And until next time, everybody, bye-bye.